Hi, my name is Inely Cesna. I'm an attorney, a mediator, and a coach. I've been mediating for over 10 years in various capacities as an in-house corporate counsel, as a volunteer mediator for the Los Angeles City Attorney's Office, and also as a partner in my own firm. So today I would like to talk to you about mediator's superpower, which I call presence, and how to cultivate that presence that shapes trust, safety, and resolution in mediation. So let's go right into it. And I have a presentation for you. There we go. The title of this presentation is The Mediator's Superpower, How Presence Shapes Trust, Safety, and Resolution. So let's take a look a little bit in what a conflict is, right? A conflict is very much a sacred space between two or more parties that are in conflict. So the mediator is entering a field of conflict that is very delicate and very sacred. And what happens in this field of conflict is what I call here a mirror effect. Of course, projection is a psychological concept that is very well known. We are always and constantly projecting on one another. But in mediation and in a situation of conflict, that projection is exacerbated. And often that projection will happen towards the mediator. And so it's important that we create this idea of presence, because it is a given that in high stakes situation like a conflict, there's going to be a high emotional toll. So this idea of clarity and impartiality and resilience becomes very important, because as we bring that into the dynamics of the conflict, we start shifting the conflict. To the extent in which our inner landscape is embedded in that neutrality, impartiality, and clarity, then we start bringing those seeds into the soil of the mediation itself. So let's take a look at what does presence mean? So what is presence? And I want to say it's a grounded, attentive, non-reactive state of being. So think of it as the calm waters beneath the waves, right? The conflict is going on right there on the surface, those crashing waves, but underneath there is the calm water. And that's that place of presence that as a mediator, we must cultivate. Another way to look at presence is it's this full engagement in participation with clarity and centeredness. So think of it as tuning fork, right? What happens with tuning forks is when you have two tuning forks put together. I actually have two tuning forks here in my office that I was gifted by a friend. And as you hit one of those tuning, the other one starts moving and sounding. You probably won't be able to hear it from the Zoom, but this is what happens. So you hit one of the tuning forks and the other one moves in accordance to that. And so what I mean by saying here is the energy that we bring, the presence that we bring as a mediator is contagious. It extends to the parties as we start modeling that presence towards the party, and they can pick up on that resonance that we bring, on that frequency that we bring as part of their interaction with us. And finally, presence is a non-biased and neutral, a genuine and authentic way of being that allows for a place of impartiality and neutrality. And I like to think of it, the vision I have is the eye of the hurricane, right? So as you know, in the eye of the hurricane, the winds are very calm. And often you can even see blue sky in the eye of a hurricane while everything is going crazy around it. And so the presence that the mediator brings is this presence of clarity, non-biased and neutral place that allows for the conflict to be whatever it is until it calms down. So very crucial to this presence is the idea of neutrality. And I like to bring this quote by Thich Nhat Hanh because he was able to cultivate neutrality in the midst of a war against his country, in the midst of a rebellion in his country. And so he says neutrality is not indifference. Neutrality is the space where truth can be heard and understanding can grow. So the minute we start creating an agenda, the minute we start creating a judgment, the minute we start creating biases, that's the minute that the truth starts to stop. The greater truth. So we start creating our own truth rather than seeing the greater truth, the absolute truth, the higher truth. And neutrality then is the foundation of this opportunity to see a higher truth. So let's look at the steps to presence. How do we get to that place of presence where we can see a higher truth? And so I bring forward here 3 steps inspired by 3 amazing minds, right? First step is to pause. Is to pause, is to take a break, to take a breath. And as Viktor Frankl said in his beautiful book, A Man's Search for Meaning, between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. So unless we notice that space, we take that space, we claim that space, there is no presence. And so cultivating this pause, this opportunity to breathe, is fundamental to create a presence. The second step is to observe. Not only observe ourselves, but observe others also. And observation, particularly self-observation, is important. According to Epictetus, according to Epictetus, it's not the things or the people that disturbs us, it's our interpretation of that significance. So in order to make myself aware of my interpretations, I need to pause. I need to observe. I need to take a breath and realize, okay, what am I interpreting out of this? What interpretations are taking place inside of me? And to the extent possible, regardless of what that interpretation is, come to the third step, which is the UPR, unconditional positive regard. Unconditional positive regard for myself and unconditional positive regard for others. And Carl Rogers, which is one of the fathers of psychology, he said that unconditional positive regard is the ability to feel as if you were the other person, but without losing the as if condition, right? Because if I lose that as if condition, I become entangled in the conflict. So think of it as a drunk person that is fallen in the ground and cannot stand, right? So if I feel what the other person is feeling, I will become drunk as well. And I'm going to be lying on the ground, and it's going to be 2 of us lying on the ground with no one, with no ability to help us stand up. And so by remember that it's an as-if condition, I can understand how that person feel as if I was them, but I still maintain my neutrality. I maintain my presence in a sense that I can give them a hand and I can help them stand up, right? That's the unconditional positive regard. It's this opportunity to create that presence within which resolution can take place. So the next here, 4 elements of presence that it's worth highlighting is that presence disrupt our unconscious conflict responses. Our personalities have tendencies. We have impulses, we have cravings, we have ways that we've learned from our family, you know, that's been inherited through our heritage, and by creating presence, by pausing, by observing, and by cultivating a positive unconditional regard, I can disrupt that unconscious conflict response to create something more strategic, to create something more consciously oriented. And in that place, I can start unpacking the illusion of conflict. Every conflict lies in a misunderstanding, lies in an identification with our emotions and our thoughts, as if we were our emotions and our thoughts, right? The idea that we have emotions, that we have thoughts, and we have a body, but we're not our emotions, we're not our thoughts, we're not our bodies, because emotions, thoughts, and bodies are, you know, up and down and all around, and we're getting old at every minute. So it's all in mutation. So the ability to recognize a presence that is deeper, more eternal than the temporary ups and downs of our thoughts and emotions and the body that we inhabit, then starts allowing us to become an observer of the conflict and to recognize and unpack the illusion of that conflict that we face. And so presence also helps us recognize our defensive mechanisms, and these defensive patterns are very unconscious as well. In another presentation I made here, I pointed out some of us are very assertive and we explode and we start poking on each other. Others are more compliant. We're going to want to do everything that is right. We're going to try to create order and structure. And some of us just wants to run away from the conflict and just go inside, you know, like a little clam, if you will, you know, just hide inside my own clam and pretend that conflict is not there. So presence is what allows us to recognize our defensive patterns and create strategies that are conscious and strategic on how to go about them. And fourth, presence promotes reflective behavior. Presence promotes us to gain a consciousness that is beyond the consciousness of the conflict itself. You know, Einstein said in order to resolve a situation, something along those lines, in order to resolve a situation, you have to be in a consciousness away from the consciousness that created the situation in the first place. And so presence is that opportunity to see things, to be in a different frequency, in a different orbit within which we can reflect upon what's happening. So it's like the iceberg, right? Let's look at the iceberg of the clients that we have as mediators, right? Everyone shows up as this iceberg, so they have behaviors, and those behaviors, in a mediation, they're usually arguing, they're withdrawing, or they're criticizing, or they are yelling, or they are doubting, they're fighting, whatever that they are doing, whatever their behaviors are. in a conflict. And they can come with very strong positions. I want full ownership of this house. I want full custody of my children, right? It's their position. But underneath that behavior, there is a very important level of feelings. There are feelings happening under that behavior. And those feelings may be angry, not usually they don't show up happy in a mediation, but they could be happy or sad or jealous or afraid or insecure. Whatever those feelings are, they are the foundation of these behaviors. And so I want full ownership of the house. That's my position, because underneath, I really feel the need of a stable place to live. I feel the need to provide a stable place to live for my children. And that's my interest, right? So when we start revealing those feelings, we step out of strict positions to come into interests where there's more room for resolution. All right, a stable place to live. Maybe it doesn't have to be this house. Maybe it could be another house. And you start creating opportunities for creative resolution there. But underneath feelings, there is something else that is important to be aware of, and that's the pain. That's where the pain resides, the source of those feelings. And that pain is usually related to basic needs, core needs of each personality. It could be love, could be belonging, it could be safety, appreciation, empathy, understanding, whatever that core need, that basic need is. And so if I want the ownership of the house, it's because I feel like I want a stable place to live. Underneath that, there may be that pain of needing that financial security because I grew up poor, because I moved from place to place when I was a child. And I can't do that anymore. I can't have that for my children. And so there's that deep ingrained pain that it's important. If we can review that pain, then we can open up even more the array of solutions that are possible for our clients. And those are the deep needs, the core needs that each of us bring into the conflict. So that's the iceberg of the client. But in addition to the client, it's important to be aware of our own iceberg as the mediator, right? Because as mediators, we also bring our own set of human disturbances and pains and feelings and behavior, right? So as a mediator, if I see myself that I start arguing or withdrawing or criticizing or creating biases and judgments, right? I can see how I start to develop my own positions. I want this person to calm down. I want them to be rational. I want them to stop talking. Whatever that position is filling up inside of me, I have to be aware that that's taking place, because underneath that, there are feelings. What feelings am I under? What are the feelings that are heating up inside of me, right? Oh, I feel the need to be heard and to be respected. So I want this person to shut up. I want this person to listen to me. I want this person to follow, whatever I am saying here or whatever it may be. But then I become aware of what's happening inside of me. And I also can become aware of my own pains and my own basic needs. Well, my teenager was acting out yesterday and was yelling at me. I feel disregarded and disrespected at home. And now I come to mediation and there is this whole conflict going on. And here I feel that I'm not heard and I'm not respected. And so my pain gets reflected out into the mediation. And I can't really be effective as a mediator unless I understand what's going on with me. Now, that doesn't mean that as a mediator, we are not going to have any of this. It's impossible. We're humans. We have that. But as a mediators, we're required to be aware of our inner landscape, to be aware of our own iceberg, so that we can either resolve it, right? We can either find a resolution inside ourselves within our own lives for these issues before we come to mediation, or we can bracket it. It's almost like, okay, I know I'm going through this issue in my own life. I'm going to put it in a bracket. I'm going to come to this mediation clean and open, and then I'll go back and solve whatever is happening in my own life. So what we are asked to do as mediators is come as an open slate, bracketing whatever is happening in our lives so that we can come here and actually be in this place with one of my teachers called the ocean of love and mercy, right? It's an empty slate where I can be present without the judgments, the interpretations, the inherited beliefs that I carry in my own humanity, and come from a place of more of a clear slate. Now, is this easy to do? No, but it's doable. And I think it's a matter of cultivating this consciousness, being aware of it, and becoming better and better the more we do it, the more we practice it. And becoming also aware of what are the unconscious biases that can be playing out within me. There's so many unconscious biases out there. This is a list of them here, so that you can kind of, there's some here that I had never heard before. So it gives you an idea of all the unconscious bias that are out there. And so I can start observing within myself, what takes place, and be more clear about that. Another idea here is that there's different ways of mediating, right? We all heard of the evaluative ways of mediating, where we are evaluating, positions and interest. There's the facilitative ways, where we are facilitating a conversation, kind of just, facilitating what's there. There's the informational way, where we're trying to bring information so that decision can be made. And then there's a transformative way, where we're really diving deep into the feelings and the pain to create something that is truly transformational. Now, my invitation here for the mediators is that we understand them all, that we practice them all, and that we become better at bringing all of this together and dancing amongst all these ways of mediating, so that we can create a presence that is truly effective in terms of bringing possibilities for resolution and seeing outside the box. So the key takeaway here is that cultivating presence means to cultivate resilience. And the only way to cultivate that is by practicing it. We got to be doing it in our own lives, not only in the mediation, doing it in our own lives. What does it mean to cultivate presence for you, right? In which ways can we stop, observe, and come to unconditional positive regard as a way of being, as who we are in the world and also in the mediation table? So this is not about perfection. There is no such thing in this human world. This is about balance. This is about awareness. It's about observation. It's about a permanent cultivation of this kind of presence that can be of service to ourselves and also to others as mediators. So some reflective inquiries here for you is, when are you most reactive in life, in conflict, and in mediation? What behaviors, feelings, and pains underlie that reaction for you? And what are, 1, 2, or 3 steps that you can take to bring more presence, to cultivate more presence in those situations, as well as in your day-to-day life? So I leave you with those inquiries. Here is a little bit of my background in terms of my experience and my contact information. If I can be of service, please feel free to reach out. Thank you, and I wish you much success.